Hi everyone, my name is Anna and today I'm going to look at my top 5 tips for making your web pages accessible. Now this is important not only for people who might have vision impairment, for example, or are hard of hearing, but also just for your users and for your own sake. As you'll see, it does make a lot of things easier. So let's roll with it and have a little look. The first tip I have is alt tags. Now, you probably already know that you're supposed to have alt tags on your images. If you don't, this is something that is immediately actionable and you should 100% go back into your code and do this because this is very important. let's say that we have a picture called, for some reason, potato.jpg, and it's a picture of a man. Now, a lot of people will create an alt tag that says picture of a man or a man. This is fine. It's better than no alt tag at all, right? But it doesn't give a lot of information. It doesn't tell us about the mood. It doesn't tell us about the context of the picture. It doesn't help us understand the role the picture is playing in whatever website we're looking at. So, something that would be much better would be potato. This is past Anna coming back to haunt me. Potato on a man in the desert looking into the distance. Okay, so let's say on a man's head to make it clearer exactly what's going on. Yeah. So this man is looking into the distance, he's in the desert, and there's a potato on his head. Now, I don't, I can't tell a lot from this exactly what's going on, but at least it gives us a bit more context. Maybe this is something a bit more humorous, or maybe this is about a man's personal journey with his potato. We don't know, but at least at this point, we're giving the user a lot more information about what's in this picture if they can't already read it. So this is kind of a little introduction into things called screen readers. So if people can't see images for whatever reason, then they can use what are called screen readers that will actually read to them the contents of a web page. So they might not be able to see this image, but they can at least know that it is a picture of a potato on a man's head in the desert looking into the distance. So again, probably not the best example, but it could be something like, rather than picture of a woman, it could be, a woman stands on the edge of a cliff, her dress blowing in the wind as she looks over the water. Okay, that tells us something, right? That's evocative. It gives us information. So we want to pass that information on to our dear users. The next thing is color contrast. This is my second tip. Dark background, light text. Light background, dark text. Don't mess with it. Don't mess with it too much. I know you want to play with some colors, that's great. But some people cannot see colors. We have people who are colorblind, both partially, for example, red-green color blindness, but you also have people who literally see in black and white, right? Or maybe they don't see very well at all. Maybe they're older and their vision is getting worse over time. Make it as easy for them as possible. Please keep the dark background with light text, keep the light background with dark text. Yeah, don't mess with that too much. The next thing, the third big tip for website accessibility, semantic HTML. Now, this is something we see a lot with newer coders, is that we get a lot of divs, because divs are very useful. I don't deny it. I love a good div. Who doesn't? But what we can do instead is use semantic HTML, that is, divs with names, essentially. The main ones you'll see are nav, main, and footer. You will see these in almost every modern website. So nav is obviously for navigation bar. Main is for the main body of what you're including. So you've got the body tag, of course, which encapsulates everything. The nav bar would be in there. Then you would follow it with main, which has the bulk content of your website. And within main, you could then have things like sections. A side could also actually be separate from main. That would be like a sidebar, maybe with some more information, a few quotes, something along those lines. Article is used for entire encapsulated articles. So if you're writing a blog post, for example, that would be a perfect example of an article. And then a footer is, of course, that little section at the bottom of your page, usually a little section at the bottom of your page with additional information, maybe some contact details or copyright information, those kinds of things. So please use these. It will be really helpful to your users with accessibility issues. But it is really helpful to you. So do yourself a favor and use these, because you may not yet have the experience of coming back to old code, but if you do have that experience, you know how disorienting it can be. Coming back even to your own code that you made not that long ago can be very confusing. If you have everything using these semantic tags, it is much easier to look at it and know in an instant what section is responsible for what part of your page. Whereas if everything is a div, you have to really go like, okay, hang on, that div, that was the article, and that's, I think that's the sidebar. This just makes it a lot easier for you. It also makes it easier with things like CSS selectors, because as you know, you can probably select, well, you can select by tag. So you can actually, therefore, use these semantic tags to further target your CSS selectors. So it's also useful for you. On a similar token, with headers, please make sure that your H1 is the lead headline. Your H2 is the next most important thing. H3, the next most important thing. Keep it in that order. I know sometimes people like to play around with this in order to do some cool styling or whatever, but try to keep to this structure, because that is how the screen readers prioritize information, and so it is important to everyone. Do that. Now, this is one that actually I learned relatively late, and it is this idea of when to use a button and when to use an anchor tag, which is also known as a link, the A tag. Now, this is something you see quite often, which is that buttons are styled to be links, or more to the point, buttons end up being links. So you click on a button to go to a new page, for example. This is really bad practice under the hood if you are using a button tag, right? So buttons should be for actions. And this normally means some sort of action like submitting a form or prompting an alert, usually something to do with JavaScript or some sort of action, yeah? So, oh, okay, that wasn't quite what I expected. Let's try that again. Tuk, tuk. There we go, that's better. Buttons should be for actions, right? Links, or anchor tags, I should say. Anchor tags are for links. Now you might say, but hang on, I really want my button to go somewhere. I want it to look like a button. No problem. The great thing about CSS is that you can style an A tag to look like anything at all. So, and even in Bootstrap, for example, you can use class names for buttons on an anchor tag and it will look like a button. So from the non-visually impaired user's perspective, it still looks exactly the same. But for those people who are looking at it from under the hood, so to speak, it is much easier to use. So this is very good practice. Anchor tags, link somewhere, buttons, do something. That is the basic idea. And by do something, I don't mean go to a web page. Don't try to get around it that way. You know what I mean. Okay, and the last but not least is my fifth tip for how to make your websites more accessible, which is to use labels for forms and not placeholders. So this is a really common thing. You see this all the time in modern forms, where rather than actually say full name and then have an input field, you just have a placeholder that indicates what information you expect from the user. It's not great. This does actually not help a lot of people, and it makes it really hard for people on many devices to actually be able to see what each field is expected of them, what is expected of them in each field. So a better way to do it is to use label. And not only to use a label, but to use label with a for piece of information, a for attribute. Let's go with attribute. So here you've got for, and it says name, and this will actually connect to the ID of an input field. And that means that when someone clicks on the word name, the input field will highlight. So this makes things a lot easier for people who need more accessible options for whatever reason, and it also makes things kind of nifty as well. Like, they don't have to click directly on the input. They can kind of just click on the label and you get the input you want. It makes it easier to tab through things. You can also, if you want this to be one section, you can actually wrap. Oops. Yeah, that's right. You can actually wrap the input inside the label like that. If for whatever reason maybe you're using Flexbox and you only want it to count as one item, you can do it that way as well. So there are many ways you can do this, but having that label connected to the input rather than putting it in here. So you see here we've got full name as the label, and then we use the placeholder to be an example of that input. That is the proper usage of placeholder. Using placeholder to indicate what information is required is very bad practice. So that is basically it. Those are my 5 tips to make your websites more accessible. I hope that I've given you something to think about, and I hope you've learned something today. If there is something that you think I've missed that is huge, please do leave a comment. Please do come speak to me on Twitter. I am always learning, and I'm happy to be corrected if I am wildly, inappropriately incorrect on any of these topics. So please do come to me, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.